The Indianapolis Colts have benched Anthony Richardson, and I think they're making a big mistake. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today, as I am every single Wednesday, by Locked On NFL expert Luke Braun, the Brain. On today's episode, I'm going to tell you why we need to stop talking about the New Orleans Saints and New York Jets. We'll talk about a big trade the Ravens made to get another wide receiver, but we'll start with the Indianapolis Colts benching their second-year quarterback, Anthony Richardson, a move that I think is a big mistake and Luke may not agree with. Before we dive into it, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So we got the big news. Anthony Richardson being benched by the Indianapolis Colts in lieu of Joe Flacco. Luke, I'll just say it plainly. I think they're making a big mistake here.
They had to, man. They've made a big mistake, and now they have to eat it. But I don't think you could look Alec Pierce or Josh Downs or Ryan Kelly in the eye and say that you have their best interests at heart if you kept Anthony Richardson out there.
Well, that's a fair point, but I do got to say, my guy Zach Hicks from Locked On Colts doesn't agree with the decision.
The Indianapolis Colts have made the asinine decision to bench Anthony Richardson in favor of 39-year-old quarterback Joe Flacco. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your favorite film nerd over here at Locked On Colts. And yes, the Colts are giving up on the 22-year-old quarterback after just 10 starts in the NFL in favor of the 39-year-old quarterback Joe Flacco, who will likely get them to their 8-9 win benchmark and get them maybe a chance at getting into the playoffs and earning the beautiful right to getting blown out by the Kansas City Chiefs or the Buffalo Bills. This is everything the Indianapolis Colts want. They want mediocrity. They want to be that team that is relevant fodder for the rest of the league. So you can kind of talk about them, but there's no expectations of anything past that. In all seriousness, Anthony Richardson was not trending in the right direction, and this experiment was struggling right now. But you don't take a quarterback with his youth, with his inexperience, and don't expect some issues along the way. This was a really bad stretch from Anthony Richardson, and completely giving up on him in favor of a near 40-year-old quarterback halfway through his second season is ridiculous.
See, I got to be with Zach on this one, Luke. Like, this is the same argument that I've made throughout the entire season with Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers, with my Tennessee Titans and Will Levis. Like, the reality is you are going absolutely nowhere with Joe Flacco, except for where the Browns went last year, which is a first-round drubbing.
Going nowhere with Richardson either, man. The answer is die. Everyone's getting fired. Doesn't matter what they do.
I know, but again, Anthony Richardson, it's crazy to me that Daniel Jones has started 71 games in the NFL and Anthony Richardson gets 10 and gets benched. I understand that they're not going to have
That's also crazy. I agree.
Right. They're not going to have the season that the owner and the GM and the coach and the other players in the locker room want to have with Anthony Richardson at quarterback. But what is your goal? Like Zach talks about, is your goal to be a mediocre team in the middle of the pack that you can make money off of, or is your goal to win championships? Because if they want to be a sustainable championship contender, they need to keep Richardson out there for longer. Again, it's been 10 starts. Look, I'm not high on Anthony Richardson either. I don't think he's a guy that's going to pan out after what we've seen, but I agree with Zach in sense of you have to see this throughout the entire season because the upside of playing Flacco is nothing as well.
I think we're underreacting to how insanely bad it is right now for Anthony Richardson. So I just posted a 75-minute video on my Patreon page, and I'm on patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL about this.
Prepared.
And I'm going to write a long form on the Wide Left Substack about this as well, because I'm fascinated with it. I loved Anthony Richardson coming out. And what I found when I really dove in and watched, especially because the Vikings are about to play the Colts, so it made sense to go watch them too, was catastrophic. The dropbacks are not hitting the top of their drop at the right time. So when he's at the top of his drop, and that means very deep, deeper than the O-line can protect that fast, the receivers haven't turned around yet. They haven't broken off their route. So essentially every play on a longer drop, on a 5-step or 7-step drop, every time you do that, Anthony Richardson is essentially running away from dropping out of safe ground and then waiting.
So he's
You
dropping
can't live
back
like
too
that.
quickly, and it's throwing off the timing of the routes, and it's hurting the protection.
Either that or every Colts wide receiver is way too slow, which also could definitely be the case.
I mean,
the timing is broken. If you ever ask him to do a lot of these Shane Steichen like RPO type things, his the like shotgun RPO, that footwork is really difficult. You want to watch somebody who's really good at that footwork. It's actually Caleb Williams at USC.
Mm-hmm.
The Bears are also kind of wrecking him. That's a different thing. But at USC, he was really good at that footwork. It's very flexible. Get your feet around, get your feet lined up the way they're supposed to be, get your hips aligned the way they're supposed to be. Anthony Richardson isn't even trying to do that. He's just like galloping into trouble. Not to mention just the misses downfield. At the first flash of any color, any problem for your O-line, which you're hanging out to dry every play, by the way, you decide to go into scramble mode, right? He's an eyedropper, just like a lot of these quarterbacks that can rip off 70-yard touchdowns in college that think that they can come into the NFL and do it. None of that is working. And if you keep him in, not only do you lose a bunch of games because he sucks, but he calcifies those bad habits and he's never going to get better. I cannot disagree more with this sentiment that the only way for a QB to get better is to throw him into the fire and have him get used to however he survives. We have watched too many Justin Fields type situations where those habits calcify. No, what Anthony Richardson needs is to go in Rice for 2 years, get completely forgotten about, reconstruct the way he drops back, reconstruct the way he sets up, reconstruct the way he reads the field. And then maybe he can have a sort of Geno Smith style resurgence down the road. And guess what? That ain't happening with the Colts. And even if it is happening with the Colts, that ain't happening with the people who run the Colts right now, because they are not keeping their jobs.
Well, that was going to be my next question to you is, do you think that this happens with the Colts? And for me, I'm looking at this. If you had any hope of him turning it around and you're on the Colts, you don't do this. To me, this is a sign that the Colts internally don't think that he can get through these struggles in a timely manner. It's the same thing with Bryce.
Not this year. Absolutely not. And I agree with them.
We're not giving up on Bryce. The Colts have already come out and told Stephen Holder, like, we're not giving up on Anthony, all that. But you don't do this unless internally you think, okay, we can't fix this. Like, this isn't going to
not on the fly.
Anytime.
This is an off season. This needs an off season to get fixed. Like, Joe Flacco's just a better quarterback right now. And that's why I started this the way I did. Like, you cannot look other Colts players in the eye, players in contract years, players with $1 million incentives for team success, coaches that are coaching for their job. You as the front office, you or as ownership, you can't look any of those people in the eye and say, yeah, we're going to put out the bad quarterback in the hopes that he develops, which he might not even do it just to save face. You can't do that. You cannot do that and expect to be respected in this league.
Yeah, 100%. That makes sense. And I mean, man, it's just a tough situation for the Colts with the draft pick that they've used and what they've invested in Anthony Richardson. But, I understand your point there of looking all the other players in the eye and not being able to do that. It's a tough situation all around. But we're going to look at some wide receiver situations. We got some wide receiver news on Tuesday as well. The Ravens make a trade and the Texans lose a wide receiver. How does this impact their Super Bowl chances? Before we get into it, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On NFL your first listen. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by Bilt. All right, listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn the rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Bilt Rewards comes in. Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Bilt points roll in. Use the points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points towards a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them towards a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Earn points on paying rent right now when you go to join Bilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's JOINBILT.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure that you use our URL so they know we sent you. Join Bilt.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points with your rent payments today. All right, Luke, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. I got to be honest with you. I feel like we could do full 30 minutes talking about
we
Anthony
could,
Richardson and the Colts decision here, because it is an absolutely massive one. But we also got some massive news in the NFL with some wide receivers, as I said, one with the Baltimore Ravens, which is good news, and one with the Houston Texans, which is not so good news. The Baltimore Ravens made a trade for Diontae Johnson with the Panthers, and my guy Kevin Ostreicher from Locked On Ravens broke down the news.
The Baltimore Ravens make a trade. I'm Kevin Ostreicher, the host of Locked On Ravens. Diontae Johnson, the Carolina Panthers wide receiver, is on his way to Baltimore. Compensation reportedly Baltimore's 5th-round pick for Carolina's 6th-round pick and a pick swap. And, of course, Diontae Johnson being the main headliner of that package. Baltimore brings him into an offense that currently has Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman as their top 2 wide receivers, but Diontae Johnson will serve as a nice change of pace and another weapon for Lamar Jackson. There's still a possibility the Ravens make another move, possibly on the defensive side of the ball. But for now, Baltimore adds to their wide receiver room with a solid veteran.
Okay, look, Kevin hinted at it there. I get the move. Like, you want to be better. You know, they didn't pay a lot. 5th round swap with a 6th rounder. Like, they basically paid nothing for this, and that's fine. But the Ravens were already number 1 in passing DVOA. Their issue is in the secondary at cornerback on defense. So, like, I know that Diontae Johnson is a guy who can separate against man coverage, and maybe that's something that they lack. But Rashad Bateman was like number 1 in the NFL in separation data last year. He was great in that aspect. So, like, good move. You're adding a pretty good player. I wouldn't say a great player, but a good player. You didn't pay a lot for it. So I'm not going to say it's like a bad move. But I got to be honest, in terms of like the Ravens Super Bowl chances, this doesn't really move the needle for me at all.
This doesn't do a lot for me either. It's fine. It's opportunism. You get a player you like. You can't. Wide receiver is one of those positions you kind of can't have too many of. Right. Keep each other fresh and stuff. Have as many threats on the field and stuff. So it's fine to me. But yeah, it doesn't change a lot about the a Ravens team that I already felt pretty good about. But if I remember, didn't the Panthers get Diontae Johnson for a 6-7 swap and then they flipped him for a 5-6 swap? So they're like profiting here.
Yes, right.
Good job. Right. You did something.
Yeah, a bad team made a good move. I hate to do the home cooking, but it's like the Titans with Ernest Jones. They trade for Ernest Jones for a 5th, but then get a 4th and a 6th back. So it's like, you're a terrible team, but I guess that's good asset management from that perspective. But yeah, I'm with you for the same reasons. The Ravens need help on defense, and if they can acquire another cornerback to help them, then I'll say that this has helped their Super Bowl chances, but I do not think that Diontae Johnson really does much for me.
No, it doesn't stop the Ravens from also getting a cornerback too. Like it's
right,
their
right.
It's a 5-6 swap. It's basically nothing. It's a little bit of like, I don't know, is there salary shed to be done here?
It's like 15 spots in the draft at the end of the day.
Yeah, in like the late hundreds. Nobody's gonna care.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess the bigger news of the day, I know, Luke, you're like, yeah, whatever, trades, whatever, no big deal. But the bigger news certainly is that Stefon Diggs tore his ACL, and he's going to be out for the Houston Texans. And while I don't think that the Diontae Johnson trade really moves the needle for me in terms of the Ravens Super Bowl chances, I still think they have a good chance. I just don't think that this increases it in a big way. I think this is a monster blow to the Houston Texans. I think you look at the Texans, their down-to-down efficiency on offense has not been good. They have not been a good offense. They've been a team that hits big plays because CJ Stroud can find these talented wide receivers down the field. Tank Dell, they haven't had Nico Collins for a while. He's going to come back, though. But at the end of the day, I think this offense needs that big play opportunity and needed all three of those wide receivers to really be a Super Bowl contender. So while I don't think that the Diontae Johnson move really changes where the Ravens are at, good or bad, I do think this is a massive blow to the Houston Texans. And I don't think that without Stefon Diggs, they're going to have enough to make the Super Bowl. Even with that defense, man, those edge rushers are absolutely incredible. But I think this is a massive blow to the Texans. And I know that they'll still be a good team and they've given themselves a good head start here, but I do not view them as a true Super Bowl contender with this loss.
I think if you fancy yourself a Super Bowl contender, like I'm sure the Texans internally do, you have to be able to overcome something like this. Nobody gets to just have all their superstars be healthy all year. Everybody has somebody get hurt, and eventually it's going to be somebody important. And I kind of do think the Texans are built to withstand this. I mean, last year, once CJ Stroud kind of got through his rookie struggles, and they were so white hot at the end of last year, they go win a playoff game and they give Baltimore at least a good fight. And that was Nico Collins and Tank Dell basically being the main guys. So I think that there is an apparatus there in Houston that has shown that it can be successful, that it can go toe-to-toe in the playoffs. Obviously, it's not better without Diggs. Like, Diggs made them better, and they're going to have to kind of revert back to an older version of themselves, but there's proof of concept. And if they want to be a Super Bowl team, you don't get to just go into a season and say, well, we win the Super Bowl if no one gets hurt. You don't get that. That's like saying, well, I get to be rich if I win the lottery. Nobody gets that. It's a physical game. So you've got to find a way, overcome. And I think that if anybody can do it, I feel like the Texans are pretty well set up.
Well,
it's like not like they have nobody to throw the ball to anymore, you know?
Right. On the flip side of that, if you want to look optimistically, they do have quite a bit of depth at wide receiver. You have Xavier Hutchinson, you have Robert Woods, you have John Mechie, you know what I mean? Like, they have players at that position that aren't, garbage at the end of the day. So they maybe could. I think for me, it's more the high-end upside. You're right. Proof of concept. Without Stefon Diggs, they were still a good playoff team. But to take that next step, which they needed to take to be able to be a Super Bowl contender, I don't think they can do that without Stefon Diggs based on the nature of the way their offense has operated so far this year. I know that you still think that they can do it, but would you at least admit that this hurts their chances? Like, if you were making the book,
sure, yeah.
Would you take the Houston Texans odds down at least a touch?
Sure, you take the odds down, but put it this way, and this is this next step until you're a contender. There will come a moment where the Texans are getting ready for a playoff game. They're almost certainly going to get to play at home in the wild card round. Let's say they win that one. They're going to play some, 6 seed that probably shouldn't be in the playoffs, and then they're going to go to the divisional round. They'll maybe travel to Buffalo or to Kansas City or whatever. You walking into that game, Texans at Buffalo Bills, going, Texans have no chance here, not without Diggs. No, that one's 0-0, and you can go pull an upset and something can happen. I think a chip, a chair, a chance, that's the way I always look at playoffs and stuff. The Texans are going to sleepwalk to a division title the way the rest of that division is going.
Absolutely. And
from there, they get home playoff game, maybe even another home playoff game, depending on how seeding turns out.
Right.
I think that gives them a puncher's chance, as good a chance as anybody that shares an AFC with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, right. That's fair. The big bad at the top of the Mortal Kombat tower is still going to be there that you're going to have to knock out. But with that being said, big wide receiver news. Anthony Richardson benched by the Colts. A lot of big news in the NFL this week that deserves to be talked about. But there are a couple of teams that we're stopping the discussion on. We're not talking about these teams anymore.
No more.
I'm looking at you, New Orleans. I'm looking at you, Jets. We're breaking that down. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Again, bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. And I've really been enjoying placing live bets on drive to drive, like whether a team's going to punt, get a field goal, turnover. When you're a Titans fan, you can bet on punts. FanDuel is a great place to make some cash. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets on FanDuel. That's why FanDuel is an all-encompassing hub of football information. Just visit FanDuel.com today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Luke, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Again, talked about Anthony Richardson getting benched, some wide receiver news, but now it's time to pour a large cup of haterade. Me and Luke are going to meet at the haterade cooler here and talk about a few teams that we don't want to talk about anymore. We've absolutely had enough. And I don't think that we're alone, because my guy John Butchko from Locked On Jets, he thinks this might be a worse team than the worst team of all time.
The Jets in 2024, they go down as like an all-time bust team. They go down with like the dream team the Eagles had in 2011. They go back with the early Dan Snyder team in Washington when they signed Deion Sanders and Bruce Smith. You want to go to other sports, the Lakers in 2012 and 2013, they had Kobe Bryant and Pau Gasol, and they traded for Steve Nash and Dwight Howard. And the team that I compared the Jets with last week, the 1992 New York Mets, who had a book written about them, the worst team money could buy, a Mets team that had a lot of stars on it and finished in 5th place in a 6-team division. And a week ago, after the Jets were blown out by the Pittsburgh Steelers, I said the Jets were football's version of the worst team money could buy. But I got to be honest with you, I think after losing to the Patriots, they're worse than the worst team money could buy. It's tough to believe how bad this team is right now. They just lost to maybe the least talented team in the NFL.
John absolutely brings the heat on Locked On Jets, man. One of my favorite guys to listen to on the network. He is cooking, and he has something to say. But I agree with him. This Jets team is god-awful, and I said it a couple of weeks ago, Luke, and they play like they're a team that plays without a soul. Like, you can tell that they were developed together, that it's hard to put your finger on because they have talent and they've signed all these different guys and they got a good defense and all these, but they just don't play with togetherness, in my opinion. And football is the most militaristic, if that's the right militaristic, I think I got that right, sport that there is, in my opinion. And you have to play with a level of togetherness in football because it's so physical and it's so grueling and it's so grinding. And the Jets do not play with that. And I think that starts with the leader of the team, Aaron Rodgers, who's been shown to be one of the most selfish players in recent NFL memory. I mean, I hate to be this way, but the guy's own family doesn't like him. I mean, that has to mean something here. Like, at the end of the day, again, I just think the Jets are a team with no soul, and they play like a team with no soul, and I'm tired of talking about them. They've had enough attention for how bad of a team they are.
Enough of this 2-6 crappy team that's not, they're going to draft in the top 12, and Aaron Rodgers is probably retiring soon. They'll be in a terrible cap thing. They're going to go into this horrific rebuild, and then they'll draft some QB that they're going to ruin because their team is too bad, and then they're going to bench him in 2 years, and we're going to be like, oh my God, what a mistake. Like, you could just see this this cycle like replaying out with the Jets. I've heard enough. All right, we've seen him on primetime forever. Oh, Aaron Rodgers in a new team. Is he going to lead them to the Super Bowl? No. We know the answer is there. No, it's over. Put somebody else on primetime, please, God.
Yes, we are begging you, NFL gods. Please use the flex option and get the Jets out of our lives. Another team I feel like that is the New Orleans Saints. And my apologies in advance to the mastermind, Ross Jackson. They're getting Derek Carr back.
I'm not apologizing to Ross for this. Get out of here, Saints. You're done.
Fair enough.
You're 2-6 too. Nice 2-0 start. It was very fake. Goodbye. We will see you all in 2025.
I think Ross might agree with us, especially with Derek Carr coming back, because he is exercising caution.
The New Orleans Saints are expecting the return of Derek Carr on Sunday against the Carolina Panthers, but let's be clear. That doesn't mean that the New Orleans Saints are somehow contenders. Again, I'm Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. Getting your starting quarterback back in the lineup is always better than not having your starting quarterback in the lineup. So I do expect to see some improved play for the New Orleans Saints. But here's my issue with the return of Derek Carr. That's got not very much to do with Derek Carr himself. Is he going to block for himself? Is he going to block for star running back Alvin Kamara? Is he going to tackle opposing ball carriers? Is he going to rush the opposing passer? No. So Derek Carr could be back, all that the New Orleans Saints want. They can have their starting quarterback back. That's great, but that's not enough to fix what has gone south for this team and has led to a 6-game losing streak. That's simply who the New Orleans Saints are, where the New Orleans Saints are, and getting Derek Carr back, unfortunately, not going to be enough to change those fortunes.
Ross is 100% right. And with all that being said, I don't want to talk about the New Orleans Saints again until they have a new coach. How long does Dennis Allen have to be one of the worst head coaches in the NFL for the Saints to blow this thing up? And they're giving big-time contracts to a running back who's about to be 30. Like, they just do everything the wrong way. And I'm glad that they're not even going to eke out like a middling 7-win, 8-win season this year. I'm glad that it's just going to be terrible because that's what they deserve.
It's time, yeah, that they have is this finally the like cap chickens coming home to roost for them? No, you know what? I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about the Saints anymore and their stupid cap thing. Congratulations, you restructured another contract. Please enjoy 2-6 and getting dunked on by Kirk Cousins in your division.
Yeah, please fade into obscurity. That is what I am asking for. There are some other teams in here as well that Luke and I wanted to get to. A team like the Miami Dolphins. Their season is over.
Oh my God, the Dolphins. We need to shut up about the Dolphins. Tua's not it, dude. We heard but when Tua gets back, maybe they'll be a contender. They weren't a contender last year with Tua. Okay? They were a wild card team at the end of the day because they collapsed down the stretch and they just like completely melted away by wild card weekend. They're a 7 seed that didn't matter. There's only been one 7 seed that even did arguably matter. It was the Packers, and they still did lose the next week. Enough with this, okay? Tua's not the answer over there. They have all of the fastest guys in the world and a quarterback that can't throw freaking deep. I've heard enough about the Dolphins. It's another division that's basically decided by Halloween.
I'm staying in Florida. I'm so sick of hearing about the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it really, to me, it comes down to Trevor Lawrence. Anthony Richardson is the new Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion. Trevor Lawrence is not playing awful. I will admit that. He is playing better than Anthony Richardson. But Trevor Lawrence has never gotten to the level that the pre-draft expectations or the draft season expectations laid out for him. He's a number 1 pick. He's the most generational prospect that's come out since Andrew Luck, all this other stuff. What I find is, Luke, a lot of people who scout these players during the draft don't want to give up and don't want to admit that maybe they weren't right about these players. So they blame the O-line, they blame the wide receivers, they blame the coaches. Everybody else is to blame except for the quarterback because I wasn't wrong about my draft prediction. I mean, to me, I'm sick of hearing about Trevor Lawrence. He's been okay this year, but he's not that guy. He's not the guy that people said that he was going to be. Jacksonville's 2-6. They're not going to the playoffs. Their season is over. I'm tired of hearing about him. So obviously I sound like a bitter and petty Titans fan, but I'm a bitter and petty Titans fan. I don't hide from it at all. Anthony Richardson sucks. Will Levis sucks too. Trevor Lawrence ain't that guy. And the 3 miserable teams get to be miserable together and quit acting like your team ain't miserable. That's all I got to say about that.
Watch Houston soar over their heads. Yes. I remember this had to be like 2018, 2019. And I put out a poll because people were already talking about Trevor Lawrence as like the next big thing. And I was like, would you trade your first round pick right now for the rights to draft Trevor Lawrence, but you have to wait 3 years? And everybody was like, oh my God, yeah, I would absolutely do that. And it's like, wait, really? Right now you would get nothing for a first round pick for 3 years, have absolutely nothing. And you would defer that 3 years to get a quarterback who's currently a sophomore in college. And everybody's like, of course he's going to be the next big thing. Well, those people would have been mired in mediocrity. Speaking of which, enough about the gosh darn Cleveland Browns. They are the bad guys of the league. They're not even a heel. Sean Payton's a heel. That's a villain, but a fun one. Okay. No, the Browns are villains. They are, I think, the team that is most willing in the entire league to embrace people with horrific accusations, their entire quarterback room. I don't care that Jameis Winston has a fun quote every once in a while, and I don't care that they beat the Ravens this week. They are 2-6. It is over. Everyone's getting fired. Please let me stop thinking about that team being in my favorite sports league. I'm done with them. Please get them, blow them up with a nuke so that they can go back to being the bottom dwellers that they have been for the last half a century.
I love it, Luke. I love the haterade has been sipped. I mean, Jesus turned water into wine. Me and Luke turn water into haterade, baby. But with that being said, those teams are done. This show is done. Locked On NFL. Get subscribed, stay subscribed. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, here with my co-host, Luke the Brain Braun. And as I tell you every episode, stay safe out there.